In its most basic, simplistic form, fishing is casting out a piece of bait and waiting. Most people start out fishing like this, but many get away from it. They want to hunt. They want to trick fish and force feed them, not wait for them to just follow their noses. Some even scoff at the idea of a good lawn chair session, but not me. In the right frame of mind, I can get just as excited about sitting on a hunk of bait as I can working a streamer or lure for hours. Well-rounded anglers, even those ate up with new school lures, flies, and techniques, never forget the power of a good soak or pass on the opportunity to partake in one. And when two anglers that secretly enjoy the smell of cut bait get together, the results can be salty or sweet. I'm Joe Cermele, and this is Fishing on the B-Side. I'm back in Virginia, this time to fish the famed James River, and I'm not too far from Colonial Williamsburg, otherwise known as the most boring place East Coast kids are forced to go on family vacation at least once. In the catfishing world, the James is revered. In the swimbait fishing world, my good friend Oliver Ngy is revered. So how the hell did we end up here together? The answer is veteran catfish guide Brian Funnell, who just happens to be Oliver's girlfriend's cousin. And after weeks on the road fishing the pro bass circuit, Oliver was ready for a little catfish and chill.
Taste it?
Ah, it's fresh.
Fresh? No salt?
Fresh, no salt. Ooh.
I've spent a lot of time on the James over the years, but much farther upriver from here. Where we're fishing is down low and close enough to the mouth of Chesapeake Bay that the salinity fluctuates throughout the season. Ample rain inland pushes the salt line down, giving this area more of a largemouth kind of vibe. A lack of rain lets the saltwater push upstream, and when that happens, it's possible to stick species like sea trout and redfish here. According to Brian, the blue cats tend to be less affected by the fluctuating salt than other species. But when that fluctuation happens rapidly, like it has been lately, well, it can be a real pain in the ass.
We looking for shad or bunker?
Shad. We're looking for gizzard shad.
Look at Oliver up there. He's Insta-famous. He's an Insta-famous person.
Good catfishing always starts with good bait. But in the days prior to our arrival, Brian was having a hell of a time finding shad because of the high salinity level. Almost overnight, that salinity level seemed to drop, and as Brian set his gill net, a method of bait collection I'd never seen executed in person, we all watched with, well, bated breath.
Seen a lot of dudes throw cast nets. I don't think I've ever seen anybody put a gill net out for bait before.
This would be highly illegal in California.
I think in most places, but this is Virginia. Anything goes. You know?
Cool.
It took a few sets to hit pay dirt, but we ended up hitting it pretty hard, overcoming that always important first hurdle of just having something to soak during your soak. Catching bait also gave us a little sneak peek at the kind of diversity you find in this stretch of the James.
Ooh. Yeah. We got a big striper.
What?
The local stripers may come into play again later, but for now, we're on a whisker mission. Most people have no idea that I'm pretty ate up with catfishing, especially when there's a shot at some big ones. And despite being a California bass guy, Oliver's pretty opportunistic when any big fish is involved.
Here's a fun fact. This is the first time I'm actually fishing with Joe.
True, I've rode Oliver before.
And watching me blink for an entire day.
Because you had to throw a lure the same size as the fish that we were targeting.
Though I did have to show him how to snell a circle hook.
I have to tie a knot for Oliver, because he cannot snell.
True story.
To keep things entertaining, we mixed some of the lighter outfits we brought into the spread and let those chunks fly. The fish finder told us there were cats down there. The lack of salt and abundance of bait were good signs, and in my experience, if the cats are home and hungry, your fresh, delicious shad chunk isn't going to sit there for very long.
Oh, much bigger than I thought. Not massive, but much bigger than I first thought. There we go. There's an icebreaker cat.
At right around 12 pounds, you'd call this cat cute for the James. Blue catfish were first stocked here in the 1970s, and all these years later, you gotta break 50 pounds for a fish to even be worth bragging about. At least, that's the case for Brian and the locals, but for guys like Oliver and I, who don't get the chance to target trophy cats as often, it takes much less to impress us.
What do I need to clear? Anything?
Nothing right now.
Ooh, 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 ooh. That one's got shoulders.
That is gnarly.
I mean, that's if you got all of it. You got every one of them. What do we got? 34, 35.
That thing just burped in my face. That's nasty.
After spending 40 minutes untangling every line Oliver's fish wrapped up, we were pretty pumped, thinking the switch had been flipped on the bigger fish. But then an odd thing happened. Nothing. As fast as the spot turned on, it turned off despite still marking plenty of cats, so we busted a move. En route to the next location, we stumbled upon a group of commercial fishermen shocking for catfish. There are so many blues in this river that it's actually become somewhat of a problem, as these fish outcompete native species for food and habitat. According to Brian, their demand as a food fish isn't enough to make a significant impact on the population or sustain commercial fishermen, so most of the commercial haul is sold for fertilizer. Seeing all those stunned kitties, however, does confirm what we were seeing on the fish finder in every other spot we hit that afternoon. But with the exception of a few half-hearted taps and wiggles, we didn't boat another catfish for the entire rest of the day. No matter where we moved, no matter how many times we freshened baits, there was clearly some kind of river-wide lockjaw event happening here, which even Brian agreed was pretty atypical for James River cats, but not so atypical in my opinion for the month of September, which this was, and which happens to be my least favorite month to fish. It's a transitional month, where weather and temperatures are all over the place and fish like stability. As beautiful as the weather was for us in the mid-70s, this was the area's first plunge below the 90s of the season. The best we could hope for was that the cats would be a little more accustomed to whatever was throwing them off today, tomorrow.
Catfishing is dope.
Cats round 2 at least started out on a pretty positive note.
Our net is
Loaded. In a single drop, one-stop shop right in the marina, Brian netted us enough fresh gizzard shad for a week's worth of catfishing.
It's like a straight up commercial fishing op right now. This is all hands on deck. I need you to turn that off and get your hands in here, Tom.
Loaded down with edibles, Brian made a beeline for a hole that even in the toughest conditions has always treated him well. It's the hole that many fishermen have regardless of what they fish for, where if you blank there, you know you're probably not going to make anything happen anywhere else. And while I'd be lying if I said all the cats we marked right away clicked on instantly, right around 9 a.m., they did in fact click.
Get his ass. You don't have him. You don't have him. Hey, that was good though. That was like the best hit we've had in, I don't know, a week. Yeah. Oh shit, behind you was on something. Oh, this one. Oh yeah, look at this one, dude. Look at this sucker running dry. Oh damn. 33 on that. Man, does it feel heavier than 33 though. Beast of a fish.
It was a solid flurry, And while we didn't manage to entice the 50-plus pounder we were hoping for, it was at least a longer flurry than we'd had the day before. But, unfortunately, like the day before, it was clear we'd hit some fleeting window, and despite a few more hours and a few more moves, no more cats seemed to want to play. So, Oliver and I decided to give a very frustrated Brian the afternoon off, and we took ourselves a little side trip to nearby Lake Chickahominy. Not only are Oliver and I always down for some cat chunking, but we both have a secret obsession with bowfin. And Lake Chickahominy is one of the most famous bowfin waters in the East. The last time you guys saw Oliver chasing bowfin was on Season 3 of Das Boot. And we made the poor guy do this on some jank-ass canoe while standing on a wobbly six-pack cooler or something. So, needless to say, he was a little more amped up to get after them this time in his rig.
I actually had a Bassmaster Open event here a few months ago.
Yeah.
But apparently above the dam, there's a population of bowfin that are trapped and have gotten pretty massive.
I'm doing what I always do. I'm gonna throw some flukes. I like a fluke.
Okay.
Fluke man. Maybe a spinnerbait. We're just gonna see how bad you backboat me, because this is your world. Yeah, real bad. Exactly.
Chickahominy screams bowfin. It's full of thick vegetation, coves, and creeks. After all that cat soaking, admittedly we were both eager to spend some time casting, though in hindsight maybe I should have brought some leftover shad chunks. Because, well, as juicy as it all looked, there really weren't many signs of life.
September. We go to one part of this river, the water's 71. We go a mile around the bend, it's 78. It's back to 72. It's just September.
Yeah, that recent cold snap wasn't doing us any favors here either, and we were pulling our hair out. But as many anglers can identify with, you often find what you're looking for when your guard is down because you don't think you're gonna find it.
Oh, there he is, there he is. The bowfin.
Where's your net?
Had I not been so horribly backboated, obviously this bowfin would have been mine, but as the guy in the back, I am on net duty, and that's a job I take very seriously. So seriously that I got the net tangled in one of Oliver's 400 GoPro mounts, decided to be a hero and grabbed my lip grippers instead, missed the one shot I had to stick those grippers in the bowfin's mouth, and watched it shake away. While I sulked, Oliver stuck a largemouth,
That's America's favorite sport fish.
and then decided the answer to our problems was simply that he wasn't throwing a big enough bait. So he dipped into that famous Oliver Ngy swimbait arsenal and started throwing those and wasn't doing a whole lot better, but that didn't deter him. Nor did he change to a smaller bait just before sunset when some little stripers decided to play. For a hot second, I stupidly thought I was the smarter guy on the boat. I was catching, while Oliver freaking Ngy was blanking. And then a giant largemouth jammed his giant swim bait, and I was like, oh yeah, that's why he's cooler than you, because he has conviction, and you just keep buying the same bag of flukes.
Got him!
I'm not too proud to admit that there's a lot I could learn from Oliver's go big or go home style of fishing. And I'm willing to bet that some of you feel the same way, and since he showed me up so badly on the water today, I think it's only fair that I give him the floor to teach us a little more. Whether you tie on those big swim baits every once in a while, or you go all in like he does, he's got a simple trick for increasing your success throwing big in a totally Oliver Ngy edition of Talking Shit.
The shit we're going to talk about today is why you should be using a snap on some of your swim baits. If you guys are fishing a soft swim bait that's pretty much a straight retrieve presentation like a jig head and a soft body combo or something else of that nature that doesn't have a lot of head movement, you're going to benefit from the use of a snap. Snaps allow me to be fully efficient. So the time that I spend tying this snap on once isn't duplicated and wasted every time I try to change this particular swim bait I'm fishing, or the color, or the style, and I'm able to properly present more options to these fish in a short window of time. Like if the sun is starting to set on you and you're trying to figure out what's going to trigger these fish to eat. You know, people talk a lot of shit on my social media platforms about me using snaps, and I think they're kind of associated with entry-level fishing, but really they're as techy and Gucci as any other piece of fishing tackle. Yeah, don't buy those cheap brass snap swivels that you can find in every department store. These are high quality, high strength Japanese snaps. There's a few options, but like this one in particular is rated to 120 pound breaking strength. So I've got full confidence that it's not gonna open up either when I'm casting these really large, heavy baits, or more importantly, while I'm fighting a potential fish of a lifetime. And regardless if you use a snap or not, stick with the big bait through all the suck, because eventually it's gonna pay off.
The plan we were sticking to was getting back on the soak, this time in the saltier part of the James. Now, if you're wondering why we didn't deep fry any of those blue cats, it's because our intention all along was to prepare a seafood feast with black drum as the main course. To catch those, we'd need to ditch the gizzard shad and lean on peeler crabs.
Yo, that's a badass old school tackle shop right there. Loved it.
As we were loading up to play in the pure salt, barely 15 miles from where we've been catfishing, we were hoping those black drum would be a little bit more cooperative than the appetizers we were chasing around the previous night. Brian had been hammering white shrimp in the lights off one of the local docks, which sounded delicious, but we got one shrimp.
Oliver, because you're my guest, you may have that one shrimp.
Thank you. That's mine.
Anyway, black drum are kind of like saltwater catfish, and generally speaking, they don't get the same love and respect as their cousins, the red drum. In recent days, there had been a pretty fierce black drum bite around one of the area bridges, but I mean, so far, nothing that happened in recent days prior to me and Ollie coming to town had really been happening anymore. But we got set up on a nice hump with some drummy looking marks down there, and one of those crabs got sucked up within minutes. We were all pretty excited because this fish had some shoulders, but those shoulders quickly turned into wings. Wings of the biggest southern stingray I think I ever hooked.
That's like, it's like so disappointing in saltwater fishing.
We hopped around and fished the entire end of the tide and beginning of the next one and never connected with any drum. So we did what fishermen tend to do in times of desperation. Bailed out and hauled ass to a completely new body of water.
Enough black drum for today.
Let's go catch some stripers.
I was just getting started.
One of the cool things about this part of Virginia is the diversity of fisheries in very close proximity, so we jogged over to the York River to catch the afternoon tide. Brian chases stripers here often, and even though I didn't really come down here to chase stripes, after working so hard for a handful of cats, failing on bowfin and double dog failing on drum, I just wanted to catch a pile of something, like anything. Blame September, blame the moon, blame the cold front, blame whatever you want at this point. But those stripers on the York, yeah, they weren't in a much better mood than the black drum, and man, we spent a lot of time hunting around. But Brian did manage to find just one, right at the bitter end of the day.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God.
The drama!
We did it.
So worth it.
And in this case, I am convinced that it picked up that bait because it was quite literally dying of starvation.
This
Looks a little scraggly.
Yeah,
Right.
he is like empty.
Yeah.
So, poor guy. All right, let's let it go.
Good luck.
Rockfish.